Hi guys and girls, welcome back. I am very full, by the way. I just finished eating a beef patty. And I've been sleeping on beef patties, y'all. I have, like, all my life. I just actually got hip to beef patties from one of my patients at the hospital where I work. So I'm going to come and talk to you guys, hopefully briefly, about this very important topic of knowing your self-worth. The beauty and the importance of knowing who you are. Knowing your self-worth. Now, this topic isn't new. I've spoken on this before. I think it's something that comes up every now and then in our relationships. It's something that I think sometimes gets overlooked too, right? And like the concept of self-worth, right? Your actual worth, your value, how you see yourself, and not only that, but how you value yourself. I think oftentimes people undermine the value of who they are, the importance of who they are. They don't know who they are, right? It's just like they're operating out of a program. They're operating out of generational cycles, right? Based on how they were raised within their own family makeup. And so this is something I think is super important, okay? And I was just reminded of the importance of this actually in the context of my professional work. So I am a clinical psychologist working towards licensure. I work at a state facility at a hospital here in New York City. And there obviously is a culture in every work environment, right? And I see that, and I'm 4 months into this position where I work, and I see that there's a culture of kind of compliance, right? There's a culture of just do it. Just do whatever they tell you to do. Even if it means compromising your own values, what you stand for. Even if it means compromising the quality of your patient care, the patients that you are responsible for caring for. Even if it means compromising the scope of what you do as a clinician in your role, right? And I come to a crossroads where I'm like, aha. Now, first of all, I recognize that everything happens for a reason. So I don't take anything for granted. I'm so thankful that this experience happened because obviously it revealed to me where I stand in my life. It revealed to me who I'm surrounded by, essentially, at my workplace, like the true nature of the people that I'm surrounded by. It reminded me of who I am as a person, right? It was confirmation. So I kind of talked about this a little bit briefly, this encounter that I had recently at my workplace, where because there's a shortage of psychologists, and not only psychologists, but people across other disciplines as well, at the particular facility where I work, like they have been basically dumping extra responsibilities, right? Which is really not responsibility, considering it's out of the scope of my job duties, right? Now I'm assigned to work on a particular ward, which houses 24 to 25 patients. Right now we got at 24, all men, right? And because there is a shortage of psychologists in particular at the facility, they have asked us to do coverage on other wards, right? Which essentially, I've already talked about this, that there is a part of it that is, in my perspective, and I don't think it's just in my perspective, but in reality, it's unethical essentially to write progress notes on a person that you don't see, on a patient that you're not working with directly, that you don't see, right? Not only that, but also it compromises the amount of time, right, and the amount of care that I'm able to devote to my own set of patients on my own ward. And this coverage apparently is supposed to happen indefinitely. So when this new responsibility was kind of just dumped into my lap, right? Just like not even taking into account, like, okay, am I able to, does this even fit within my schedule, right? Within my current caseload, right? How does this work well with, with what I have going on? It's just kind of dumped it, right, into my lap, on my plate. And there was some conversation surrounding this encounter, this situation, right? Of course, I'm vocal, so I expressed my concern. And there were people within my team that I worked, because I work amongst other professionals, including psychiatrists, clinical social worker, medical specialist, treatment team leader. And one of the members on my team said, oh, it's going to get worse, right? I'm setting the foundation, right, the background, the backstory of what I'm going to talk about here in this video. And then I'm just looking around, and as I said before, like, I've been very observant of the culture of the place where I work, considering I've been there since December 2nd, 2021. And I'm noticing that there's burnout, high burnout amongst other people that work there, especially the direct care staff, the people who are responsible for the direct supervision of the patients there. And with their position, like, they're not even able to leave their shift if there isn't someone there to relieve them, which means sometimes they have to work overtime and double shifts, right? And I'm just like, how is this place functioning at this level of capacity, considering that it's dysfunctional, right? This is completely dysfunctional. This is not how a hospital is supposed to be ran. And do you not see how the way it's being ran dysfunctionally compromises the quality of the patient care? Not only that, but the well-being of the staff, right? Given that the staff are clearly overworked and burnt the fuck out. It just doesn't work. And it's almost as if the people who work there, of course, they have voices and they have voiced their concerns, but it just kind of goes through one ear and out the other, or it lands on deaf ears. So something that also was mentioned by one of my fellow colleagues amongst my team, aside from the person who said, oh, it's just going to get worse, is basically the narrative that nothing is going to change, essentially, right? That just it doesn't sit well with me, right? And they also said, oh, well, we've heard that before, right? When I was voicing my perspective and my response to this, right, and how I'm going to go about it, because I'm just like, you're not going to take advantage of me. This is abuse. This is clearly abuse. You're not going to take advantage of me, right? But it's just the idea that, oh, well, you work here, like, there's no other options, right? Like, where else are you going to go, right? And the sentiment that, oh, other staff have said the same thing being that they're going to be fucking out the door, but they didn't go anywhere, right? Like they're all talk. They said that too. They complained too, but they're still here, kind of thing. Interesting, right? And then the department head goes, oh, the difference between you and the other psychologists is that you haven't worked and covered 2 wards at the same time. You're only covering 1 ward and other patients on another ward, right? And I'm like, no. There's a huge difference between me and the other staff, because I don't think that people quite, they don't get it. It's like you have to show them, right? So I took off yesterday, and one thing about me, I think what people don't, it's going to be made clear, but apparently they don't know, is that I'm not pressed for money, right? I'm not pressed to work. I am there because I'm fulfilling my goal in terms of obtaining my licensure hours to get licensed. But even with that, it's like, like the way my mind works clearly is different, right, than the average person. Some people have the mindset that, okay, I gotta get me a 9 to 5. I gotta work hard, work all these years and get retirement. Like, that is not my mentality. There's a backstory to this story. I'm not going to go too much in depth with, but those who truly know me, who have followed my journey, know that, yes, there's a reason why I wrote my autobiography, American Dreamer, right? And you guys will be privy to being able to read that story, hopefully soon. It's going to come out soon. But just know that I have experienced certain things in my life that have awakened me, right, to the realities of this world that we live in. And, of course, the illusion of the American dream, and this whole idea of meritocracy, just work hard. Like, I've been over that, right? Like, I am 38 years. I had to think for a second. I'm 38 years old, right? I'll be 39 in September. So we're talking about rewinding back to 2000, around 2007-ish, right? I had this experience that I'm like, oh no. Oh, the fuck no, right? I am not going to put my life, my survival in someone else's hands ever again, right? No one should have the authority to determine the trajectory of your future by holding the keys to income, a job, a paycheck, right? Like, being able to dangle that in front of your face and take it away at will without reason. Who would want to put themselves in that position? So even back then, going through what I went through, that was definitely an eye-opening experience. But even before then, right? My dad, who I had the pleasure of being raised by, alongside my mom, but he instilled like really important values within me since I was a little girl. One of those values is being self-sufficient, right? Just, if you can do something for yourself, do it for yourself, right? Even when it comes down to working, work for your goddamn self if you can. And I remember living with him as a teenager. He was raising me as a single father. And I think I was a senior in high school. And I took a job at fucking McDonald's. Like, who hasn't, right? And I remember they hired me as a cashier. Like, I was supposed to take people's money, take people's orders, take people's money, put in the register, okay? And just be nice and have a smile and have a pretty face, right? But then I remember, like, one of the managers asked me to sweep the floor, mop the floor. And I swear, that was it, y'all. I quit. I was like, hell no. Now, back then, minimum wage was $5.50. So I was making $5.50. I worked there not even probably 2 weeks, if that. Because I did the math, right? I had to like weigh out. I had to weigh out the pros and the cons. And I'm like, okay, at the time I was braiding hair, right? I always had like my own entrepreneurial things going on. That has been a constant in my life since I've been a teenager. Think about this. So even as a teenager, one of my first jobs, aside from babysitting, I think babysitting was my first job. But I used to braid hair. And I used to make decent money braiding hair. Just cornrows. Braiding somebody's hair straight back, right? $30 for a man, right? For a woman, if they want weave, you know, be $50, $60, right? Quick. In less than an hour, I'm done. So to think at that time, if minimum wage is $5.50 an hour, knowing that I can just do someone's hair, right, and make, like quadruple that, it didn't make sense. It just did not make sense to work for someone else. And I learned this early on as a teenager, right? As I look back over my life, my adult life, and reflecting on this most recent experience working at the hospital as a psychologist. I said this before. It's like, I have not really worked for anyone. Hello, Lisa. How are you? I have not really worked for anyone. Now, from your perspective, looking at me, depending on where you are in your life, you may look at me as having a pompous attitude or arrogant or whatever. No, it's just like I know my worth. And, I see the big picture. I see it all. I see through the bullshit, right? And listen, there's a place for everyone in society. There are places for employees, for people who want to work, right? That's their role. There are places for people who are entrepreneurial, who have the entrepreneurial mindset. There are places for investors. I can tell you this, I am not in the position to be working for anyone. That's just not who I am at my core. Yes, I'm doing it now, but I make it very clear that this is just a phase, right? It's a stepping stone. But I also have to make it clear, even with the people that I interact with, like motherfuckers got shit fucked up. I am not them. And I never will be. That's just not who I am on a genetic level, all right? On a physiological level, on a biological level, that goes against everything that I am made of, every fiber of my being that just goes against that, right? There are people who can show up to work and do everything they're told to do and blah, 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 and get whatever, how much money they make in a day, and they're okay with that, but no. And I even said that when I started this job back in December, of course I told my parents, and I remember the conversation I had with my mom. I told her I got offered a job, and I actually was questioning, should I accept it? I asked my mom, I asked my dad to get their perspective on it. Not that their perspective dictates what I do, but I just wanted to kind of see what their take was. And because I needed their advice, I wanted to get their advice and their kind of spiritual guidance and inclination, because it was a very detrimental decision that I had to make in terms of getting vaccinated, given that New York had mandated that all of its state and city employees become vaccinated at the workplace. So I'm like, should I take this job or should I not? It can go either way. Should I get vaccinated? Because it was contingent upon getting vaccinated. And I asked my mom and my dad, and they encouraged me, to get back. Like, just go ahead and do it. And I thank my mom and my dad for just saying, just step out on faith. It's okay. You can just take the vaccine, right? Of course, because within obviously the conscious culture, the community, there's a lot of opposition against like unnatural things like that that are injected into our bodies, and we don't know what the fuck is in it, right? So I had to consult my parents, but I go, okay, I got my parents' blessing, so I guess I'll go for it. But I remember telling my mom, and she didn't even congratulate me, right? I was like, Mom, I got the job. She didn't congratulate me. She said, just do what they say. Yo, I had to laugh internally when she said that, because, and she knows, like, yo, my mom know me so well for her to say that. She just said the right thing, right? She's like, just do what they say. Knowing damn well, like, I'm not that. I've never been that. My mom knows me, right? And I have a lot of her energy anyway. She's just like very just strong and just has this kind of rebel energy about her, you know, just standing on her own mind. But the thing is, my mom was born in the I was born 83. So my mom is 30 years older than me. She was born 53, right? 53. My dad was born 1941. So my dad is 80. My mom is 68. But given that the time period my mom and my dad were born in, it makes sense that that was the kind of advice she would give me, right? Coming from the era that she grew up in, right? And she told me recently, you know, how it was. And she always talked about, you know, what life was like for her growing up, and just a very humbling experience during the civil rights movement and during segregation, where they actually had the fountains, the black and the white. And she was saying how they would go to the theaters and the white people got a chance to sit at the bottom closer to the screen. The black people had to sit all the way up in the balcony furthest away from the screen. And she made jokes about she made jokes about, like, you know, the seating arrangements, but how the black people would, like, throw popcorn and throw soda down and candy down at the white people and shit like that. That's funny, but yeah, it sets the context for, like, her perspective, and we are from two different generations, right? Like, I'm my mother, but I'm a more evolved person from my mom, right? I'm not her exact reflection, and so the way she sees the world, I can see the world like completely different, right? And I'm just like, it makes sense why people come from that perspective of just doing what they're told to do. That's how black people, especially African Americans, have been conditioned, especially in this country, right? Given our historical background. Just do what you're told to do. Listen to master. But think about how that impacts the mind, the psyche. Think about that, how it shapes and molds this person. That's not how we're supposed to operate from, right? Just doing what... Now, yes, discipline is good, right? So we're not talking about a disciplined person. We're talking about a person who operates out of compliance, blind submission, just doing what you're told. And that does negatively impact your self-worth, your self-esteem, how you view yourself, your self-concept. Children who grow up to become adults, who are raised from parents, right, who have that mindset, they continue to perpetuate that cycle, that perspective. They don't feel that they matter. It's no wonder why black people are treated the way we are. That's why we have to teach our children. You're absolutely correct. Yes, and I was going to talk about that. It goes into even how you talk to your children as parents. Now, I don't have children, biological children yet. I don't have children, period, really. But my patients are like my babies. But in thinking of how parents even speak to their children, how they interact with their children, you are molding that person's psyche. And you, if you were talked to that way, right, and then you feel like, okay, this is the standard, this is the gold standard of how I should communicate and talk to my child, because my parents spoke to me in that way, spoke down to me in that way. I didn't have a voice. I wasn't afforded the opportunity to offer my perspective. Offering my perspective was talking back, right? If you have that mindset as a parent, you're going to implant that, instill that in your children. And then you wonder why, when as they grow up, right, and they become teenagers, and you're expecting them to articulate themselves and have their own mind, be able to make sound decisions independently, and you're upset, you're frustrated, wondering, why don't you have your own mind? You're just following behind this person, you're just doing this, you can't think for yourself. No, they can't, because you took that away from them. You beat it out of them. You scolded them when they were just a toddler, learning to exercise their agency, their free will. So no, they don't know how to do that, right? Take responsibility for your role as a parent. Thank God, I just always had the spirit to just go against the grain, coming up from when I was younger. And my dad definitely raised me so much different, right? He instilled value into me. He told me that he raised me up when I was just a little baby in his hands. He raised me up to the sky, right? Like elevating me. It was symbolic to show that, first of all, he valued me. He appreciated me. But it was like offering me as a symbolic symbol to the universe, and elevating me in that symbolic gesture. Like, I think it was a very like important moment, right, in terms of my development as a being, as a light force. You say we don't have to be our parents. I had to unlearn many things. And yes, because sometimes it's inevitable, right? Like your parents, let's say, I think we all have an archetype, this archetypal energy, right? Or this spirit that, even though, yes, your parents are a certain way, like I was saying, I just always had this kind of spirit that went against the grain. Even though I had that spirit, being raised in a certain context, giving my mom and dad just like night and day, right? They're completely different. My dad gave me the space, be myself, right? Speak my voice, take pride in who I am. My mom, complete opposite, right? She was just like the slave master, internalized. So having to wrestle with that, right? And that's part of that unlearning. And it's like the taming, right? They like growing up in a black household, and you can tell, you can see it amongst children, black children, even nowadays, like that generational curse of taming the confidence, taming the mind, taming the energy, right? And belittling a person to the point where you reduce them down to nothingness almost, right? And they have to be subservient to other people. They don't matter. They're invisible, right? Everyone else's perspective is more important. And that's how they show up in the world, because that's how they were raised. And then you wonder why that you are treated a certain kind of way. Like, why are you treated as second class? Because that's how you see yourself, and that's how you operate on a subconscious level. Maybe that's not how you want to be treated. Maybe you're saying, oh no, I don't believe I'm second class, but it's the little subtle things that you tolerate. And even the example I gave at the beginning of this video, when I was talking about my own personal experience in working in this professional context as a psychologist and knowing how to set boundaries and when to set boundaries, and just like, no, enough is enough. And I nip shit in the bud early on. This is how you have to be. I'm only 4 months in, and I let them know, like, nah, bruh, this is not going down. I am not these other psychologists. Sometimes, like, people just don't get it because they're used to people in that culture operating a certain way. Everybody else is just behaving blindly like robots and under this conditioning. And no, I make a conscious effort. Like, I just can't. It's just not in me to do that. And of course, yes, there's a cost associated with that. I've lost a lot. Like, that is primarily what my book is about, American Dreamer. I have. I've been down that road. I've lost a lot, and I'm willing to lose it again, because to me, my self-dignity, my self-worth, what I stand for, my values is way more important than materialistic things. So yes, it may cost you, but you have to stand. You have to stand for something. And I got this shirt yesterday from Nicholas Brooklyn on Fulton Street, and I absolutely love this shirt, you guys. I love it. Well-behaved women. I think it says, well-behaved women rarely make history. Look at that. It has my girl Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks. Look at that. Angela Davis, Assata Shakur. But it's just in my spirit, and I felt that I needed to share this with you guys. Because some people will have you fucked up. Some people will have you fucked up. And the benefit, right? Because we know the cost of standing firm on what you believe in. Yes, you may end up losing some relationships. You may end up losing a job. Losing whatever, right? But to me, that doesn't matter. I've been down that road, and like I said, I'm willing to risk it all again, right? But the benefit, it feels so good when you set boundaries, you value yourself, you walk in who you truly are as a person. And it's unfortunate because, yes, like, as Black people, we have a historical context for this, right? So it's just like, this is how things have been for Black people. Like, we've had to silence ourselves and just, agree and comply and, okay, yes, yes, ma'am, and all of that bullshit, right? And that's how we're still operating out of that program. And like the lady was saying, like, we have to unlearn some of those things, right? And catch ourselves, right? Part of it is just having a degree of consciousness, a degree of awareness, to be mindful, to be self-aware of how you show up in the world and how you interact with other people. And yeah, that takes some mental effort, right? Cognitive effort, some energy to devote to observing yourself in interactions with other people. And then even asking yourself, am I selling myself short? Am I taking care of myself first and foremost? Making sure that I am okay. Am I setting proper boundaries in relationships, both personal and professional? Am I allowing myself to be taken for granted? Am I setting myself up for being depreciated, devalued? And if you feel, because your conscious will speak to you, your body will speak to you, your mind will speak to you, and you know in your body when you don't feel right, when you feel like you've been done wrong. That, listen to your spirit. I think so long, because we have been conditioned and raised a certain way by our parents. No diss to our parents, right? We love our parents, but they have only raised us based on how they were treated. And their parents raised them based on how their parents treated them, and so forth and so forth, right? And we know that it does link back to a very dysfunctional, toxic, sick relationship that our ancestors had with their owners, their slave masters. We have to break that shit. Set those boundaries. Be cognizant. Be self-aware. Stand firm. Stand tall in who you are. So the benefit, let me tell you, I'm going to tell you guys the benefit. Hopefully I have time and my phone doesn't die. Because I got home, before I started this video, I got home, I had ate my beef patty, and I decided, like, let me go live and let me talk about this. But it matters. I remember, I'll give you guys a few examples. So, I graduated with my PhD September 2021. Before beginning my 5th year pre-doc internship, of course, you know, there's an application process where we have to apply to a certain number of sites, of internship sites, and these internship sites are accredited by the American Psychological Association. It's a very rigorous process. It's something that all psychology doctoral students go through nationwide. So not only are we competing against our colleagues or our classmates in our cohort, but we're also competing against other doctoral psychology students across the nation. It's very competitive, and to that end, they encourage us to apply to at least 15 sites. And the program that I came from, based out in Los Angeles, California, had this idea, the approach that, and this is just their reasoning, which I completely disagreed with, but they were like, you want to set yourself up for success, and this is how you do it, by only applying to a certain number of sites that, let's say, are in the low competitive range, right? Then a few number of sites that are like in the middle competitive in terms of degree of competitiveness, right? And then a few sites that are in the upper echelon, right? And not only that, but with applying to sites that are least competitive, those would may be in places that no one wants to live, right? Way out in the middle of nowhere, in towns that your ass never heard of, right? And I'm like, okay, I get, like, this is y'all guidelines, this is your guidance, but I have my own mind, and at the end of the day, I'm going to be the person living in these places, right? I'm going to be the person, number one, applying, and mind you, the applications cost, okay? there's a fee attached to the application. Aside from that, like, I am going to be the one living and working in these places, right? In these sites. So it is, at the end of the day, it's my choice as to where I'm going to apply, how many sites I'm going to apply to. Nobody can dictate that for me. Yes, you can offer your perspective, but no, this is my life, okay? So I did my own thing. Now, I got in trouble for it, so to speak, and they called a meeting. And I've been in a lot of meetings. I look back, and I'm like, I've been in a lot of meetings in that program. Kind of like disciplinary meetings, so to speak. But I had to stand my ground, yo. Like, I stand my ground. And I express myself. And if I disagree, like, you're going to know I disagree with you, right? I don't go around just disagreeing just for the sake of disagreeing, but no. Like, I'm not just going to follow what somebody say do just because, this is what they say do. Doesn't make sense. So, of course, my colleagues, like my classmates, they all, they're the guidelines. They applied to like 15. Some applied to 20 sites, which is overkill. And just applying to places that I feel like it was just out of reach. It's just, why are you applying to, and I don't want to call out any names, right? Because I know some of my colleagues do watch my videos, right? Not to put anybody on the spot or whatever, but like applying to places that, what the fuck, you ain't never been there before, you never traveled there, you have no interest in living there, what the hell? I'm not doing it. But they did, and I had only applied to 5 sites. like, fuck. Like I took it seriously, but I wasn't like losing sleep how other people were losing sleep. And it was just so stressed. It was, the anxiety was all on fleek, around that time. I remember amongst my colleagues, and I was just taking it in stride. I'm like, the universe got me. And they had advised us against applying only to sites based on like geographical location. And guess what I did? I applied to sites only in New York. And I think one site in PA. And I got my first choice in New York City. So I just think, it's a matter of the universe and a matter of confidence and just knowing your self-worth, knowing what you bring to the table. And I walked into those interviews that I got with confidence. It's not pride. And I think that's how we get things confused, because we mistake confidence and knowing yourself and having self-worth as, they're being pompous or having too much pride. As if, first of all, pride is a bad thing. It's not. But that's how we've been conditioned as descendants of fucking slaves. And I'm just like, no, you know what you bring to the table. Show up to the table. And let them, and they'll see what you bring. Like, why are you fucking worried and losing sleep as if you don't measure up and you're feeling incompetent? Not that, okay, you're perfect and you're an expert. No, we're all still learning. But show up and deliver what you know you're very well much capable of doing. Right? That's just been my perspective. So I did land with that attitude, with that approach. I landed my first choice here in New York City. And it worked out. I love the site. I got a chance to do psychological testing, which I didn't get a chance to do back when I was working on my PhD in LA. I was working at a very high pace clinical site in Manhattan, Lower Manhattan, where they had a high volume. They are said to be like the highest serving clinical agency or clinic here in New York that serves like the highest number of people with disabilities, right? Applying for services through OPWDD. And I did evaluations for them. Evaluations on children with autism and adults with traumatic brain injury, for example. So that was a very interesting, challenging experience, but I appreciated that. And I didn't sell myself short. I didn't think like, I can't apply there because I don't measure up. And no, like I said, I stepped out on faith. And another example I will give, I have a few more examples I want to share in terms of the benefits of just knowing your self-worth and operating out of that. Like when you know your self-worth, it reflects in your life, right? In your quality of life and what you attract, who you attract. And so with that, when I moved back to New York on April 1st, 2020, I obviously was looking for a place to stay, and I would rent different Airbnbs just like to explore different neighborhoods across New York. And as I was doing that, I was touring apartments too with that. And I remember touring apartments like everywhere. I was all over Brooklyn, Manhattan, mostly Brooklyn and Manhattan actually. Did I look at any in the Bronx? I think Bronx was off the fucking list. I think it was just Brooklyn and Manhattan. And I saw so many apartments, so many apartments. And I've said this before, and people who are from New York know that the standard of living in New York is very low for a lot of New Yorkers. They're used to it, right? You're used to the pests, you're used to the rats, you're used to the crickety floors, the wood, and just used to bullshit, right? Low quality of living, as I say. And I remember like going on these apartment tours and interacting with the agents and the people renting the apartments. And I remember going into like one apartment and I'm looking, of course I'm looking for shit wrong, right? Looking for a reason to disqualify this shit off my list. Just make it easy, right? Because the pictures may look nice, but that don't mean nothing. You gotta go and see the apartment. And so I go into this apartment and I look and I saw a fucking dead cockroach. And I said to the guy, there's a cockroach there. And he's like, oh, yeah, that's not uncommon. Like, pretty much that every apartment in New York has pets. That's just the reality. Just have pets. I'm like, no, not my motherfucking apartment. I am not paying thousands of dollars to live in an apartment. Pets. Like, where do you do that at? Like, how can you accept that quality of like, could you imagine if I said, you know what, I don't think I deserve better, right? And I just settled. And then I end up having roaches. Living amongst roaches, paying thousands of dollars. Like, who does that? There was another apartment. Now, that actually was in Manhattan. There's another apartment I toured in Brooklyn. And, because I toured so many, and it, like, the stairs were just crickety-crack, And, like, what gets me is how, like, the people showing you the apartment, like, they act like there's nothing wrong with it. Like, this is just, like, how can you try to sell somebody this piece of bullshit? Like, what the hell? I'm just like, nah, that ain't gonna cut it. Another apartment I toured, Lower Manhattan. This was, I think, East Village. And it was actually newly remodeled, right? So it stood out. I'm like, okay. But what was an eyesore was across the street, there was a homeless encampment. Homeless people set up their own little bed across the street from the building, from this apartment building. And I took, because I would like to, like, check out the neighborhood and see, like, okay, what does neighborhood look like? I walk around the neighborhood, walk around the block, and you got dudes standing on the corner selling drugs to each other. Now, granted, this is New York City, so as I like to say, New York, like across the 5 boroughs, no matter where your ass at, no matter what neighborhood, I look at New York City as a whole. That shit gangster. It's hood. No matter what neighborhood you live in, right? But some places, it's just like in your fucking face, yo. It's just like, hell no. And I feel like if I could help it, I am not going to position myself in a certain environment that I know is not conducive to quality well-being, right? Psychological, emotional. I just, no. I can't. But that was a really nice apartment. And I actually have videos. I remember I did videos of that apartment. I did a video tour inside that apartment. It had a wash and dryer. It was like everything was brand new, and it was like, okay, it was nice, but the neighborhood, the neighborhood was a no for me. And I ended up getting an apartment up here in Upper East Side, and it met my standards. It was clean, and the neighborhood is nice. And honestly, at the time when I signed the lease, I didn't know what Upper East Side was. So it's just kind of like the universe kind of guided me along with my own instincts and my own self-worth. My self-worth, having standards and knowing what I'm worth, guided me here. It wasn't until after I signed the lease and I settled in that I learned that, this is the upper class neighborhood. I didn't even know. I just looked at it like, okay, this is nicer neighborhood than the other places I've toured. And that I signed the lease, it was back, September 2020. And at that time I was working, I had started at my pre-doc internship in Lower Manhattan. And my supervisor, like, of course, I'm communicating openly with her. And I told her I live in Upper East Side, and she was like, oh, okay. And just to hear people's reaction, especially, like, I'm from Florida, right? I moved to New York in 2014, but it's a lot about New York I don't know, right? So I didn't know, like, I don't really know certain neighborhoods like that. So I just don't know. And so it's interesting when I tell people, like, where I live, because they ask me their reaction. So she's like, and then she says, oh, a lot of psychologists live in Upper East Side. I'm like, okay, interesting how, like, I was kind of guided here subconsciously. And as I said, when I signed the lease, I just didn't know. But then I look around, and as I settled in and I began to scope out the neighborhood, I'm like, okay, yes, like, when I toured this neighborhood before I signed the lease, I'm like, okay, it's clean, it's nice, the sidewalks are clean, wide, and all of that. You can see a stark difference. I guess it didn't really dawn on me, and then I did more research. I'm just like, oh, okay. So definitely a different demographic in terms of socioeconomic status in this neighborhood. Just goes to show that you don't have to settle. You just don't. And the universe will always make a way. It's not a question as to, oh, can you afford something? It's you start with knowing who you are first. And then everything else will fall into place, right? Valuing yourself, establishing a quality of life that you want to live, right? And being confident in that, walking in that, standing firm and not taking anything less. And you deserve it. At some point, okay, granted, yes, there's a struggle phase. We all go through the struggle phase, and hell, there could be a time where you might end up having to sleep on the floor or live amongst roaches or rats, or, in a bad neighborhood, dilapidated neighborhood, and there's drug addicts outside, and perhaps, right? But at what point in your life do you say, okay, enough is a fucking enough, right? I've lived this hood struggle life for so long. At some point, there has to be a line drawn, and you say, okay, I think I deserve better, right? I think I could level up, right? And knowing that you deserve better, that, and like, you obviously, it's a reflection of an increased sense of worth, a self-value, right? Of self-care. That's part of self-care. And that self-care obviously is a big topic. Like, it's a term that's kind of tossed around, and everybody's talking about self-care, and people think of, okay, meditating and eating healthy as self-care. And yes, those are forms of self-care, but it's also just knowing, right? Knowing who you are and valuing yourself, and everything else will reflect that, right? Setting those boundaries. And I'll give one more example, and then I'll end this video, on the benefit of knowing who you are and how it shows up. It shows up in your relationships, like your personal relationships. I have endless examples, right? Talk about personal and definitely professional, which I kind of want to go into next, right? I have a lot to say. But in terms of personal relationships, I see that how I've evolved, Oh my gosh, have I evolved from the person that I was. And there are many different aspects of me, right? I talked about, like, the entrepreneurial aspect of me, but there's an aspect of me in terms of my interpersonal dating relationships, right? And the kind of men that I would attract, and the kind of men I used to date, and the things I used to fucking put up with, right? It's a reflection of how I saw myself. This is a difficult conversation, I think, for people to have, because no one wants to be honest. No one wants to be honest and tell the truth. Especially women, right? As a woman. Because it takes a degree of vulnerability to admit that, oh no, I didn't love myself during this period. No, I didn't really see my self-worth, right? I didn't know. It's one thing to, people say, oh, well, yeah, I value myself. I love myself, right? But do you truly, though? Because it's going to show up. It's going to reflect. It's going to be ever clear if you do or if you don't. It shows up in the people that you attract, what you choose to deal with, to tolerate in relationships. And honestly speaking, when I look back in terms of my personal dating relationships and the men that I was involved with and what I allowed to happen, I cannot honestly with confidence and certainty say that I completely love myself. I know I was in a different space. I definitely was in a different space back then compared to now, who I am right now. I'm much wiser, clearly. But the difference is that my self-worth has increased, right? And sometimes you have to go through things. Sometimes you have to just be alone by yourself. And you have to develop that discipline. It takes a lot. It's not just knowing your self-worth, right? And being told like, oh, you know, you're this and you're that, right? And you internalize that. Because I was raised in a good, solid household, right? My dad put that in me, right? I knew I was a shit. Like, you can look at me, look at my pictures and tell as a little girl and people who knew me growing up, I already had a big ass ego. I knew who I was, right? But that's not even enough, I think, especially when it comes to attracting the right energy, especially male energy, from my perspective as a woman. And knowing what to tolerate, it takes so much. It takes discipline. And it takes a degree of spirituality and acceptance, right? Because it's like an internal struggle. It's a battle, I think, that a lot of women are dealing with, especially high achieving, beautiful, successful black women, high value black women are dealing with this, wrestling with this struggle, right? It's a struggle within and a struggle between self and the dating pool, right? There are options. Now there are many men out there, so a lot of options, but it's just like as you accelerate, as you climb that SES ladder, right? And as you become more self-aware, as you become more appreciative of self, it's just like you can't go back. There's no going back, right? You can't settle. You refuse to settle. So of course it shrinks the dating pool. Of course I can be married. Of course I can have children. But it's just like so many things that I was attracted, I'm just not attracted to. It doesn't woo me, right? The guys, they just don't measure up, right? My standard, yes, is high. And then you have people who say, oh, you need to lower your standards. If you don't, you're going to be single the rest of your life. You're never going to have kids. Oh, wow. That's where the spirituality piece comes in, and knowing that really all of this shit is an illusion anyway. This shit life is an illusion. The idea of marriage and the happy family and kids, that shit is an illusion. Success is an illusion, right? If it's an illusion, it's not real. You don't really have to have it to really be happy. To make your happiness contingent upon those things, is that really true happiness? And so that's where the true growth comes in, y'all. Because I've grown so much, and to the point where when you can exist in the world as a single woman and you're happy and you are complete and you are fulfilled and you're not empty, right? And you've come to an acceptance, so that's a dangerous thing. It's scary, I think, for a lot of men to be in the presence of a woman like that, right? It's not to say that, oh, I don't need a man, because I think thinking from a macro level, taking myself out of the equation, right? And just thinking from a societal, community level, a nationalistic level, right? In terms of the black community, African people, we of course need each other as black men and black women to keep the race going, to procreate, right? There's no black woman without the black man and vice versa. We wouldn't be here if we didn't need each other. But when I look at my own personal life, I'm just like, I've been single for a while, that I'm very content. And this contentment is a reflection of who I know I am as a person. If it happens, it happens. I haven't given up at all on love. I definitely have not. And I know any and everything is possible. But it's just going to look different, right? Like, it's the love that I had when I was in my 20s, right? And even in my early 30s, in my last relationship. It's different. It's going to look different now compared to then. It's much more powerful. And it's almost scary, right? It's scary to see yourself evolve as a person. To see yourself change, right? And then looking at the people who used to know you, but still do know you, and they know that you've changed. They see that you changed. You're different, right? A real friend and the people who are really meant to be in your life, they're still going to be there because they will adjust too and they will change too. Like, you grow together. Nobody should still be the exact same in all aspects of the person they were 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, right? Everything changes. Change is good. And I definitely see how I have changed, especially when it comes to my self-worth. You can see it reflected in my physical beauty, right? You can see it reflected in my internal beauty, in my interactions. And I gotta say this one thing. So, apart from my personal life, looking at my professional life, and this is something that I knew. This is not like a new revelation. This is something that I knew bit back then, right? And I shared this with the authors that I'm connected to. You guys know that I own a literary organization called Ubawa that I founded back in 2008. I think it was 2009. Time it just keeps ticking. And I emphasize the importance even then, like knowing your self-worth, because I see, you can look at a person and tell that they don't value themselves, right? It's just ever so clear. I don't care how they try to front and wear the makeup and the name brands and they got this facade. It's an energy. You can tell when a person does not value them. They don't know who they are. And it reflects in your business. And I can speak with such confidence, right? You got people that they be talking shit, but they can't back it up. But then there are people who speak, and they're speaking because this shit already backed up, right? So they speaking from a certain place that they can speak from. They have the ability to speak from. So I'm not talking just to talk. And when I say these things, even at my workplace, I think it rubs people the wrong way. And they're just like, who the fuck she thinks she is? They don't clearly know. I know. That's all what matters, though. And I just said this to my best friend. And I've said this. I know he's tired of hearing me say this. But I'm just like, yo, I look at how much I make. And it's decent. Especially unlicensed, right? Compared to my colleagues who also just entered their professions, their positions as unlicensed psychologists and working towards licensure. I'm probably one of the highest paid, aside from one other person, but she works for the federal government and I work for the state. The federal government, I'm sure, pays more than the state. But I look at my take-home pay per day. I've done the math. And look at how much I bring home each day. I broke it down. And I'm like, yo, I've made this before. Working for myself. Independently. If you're an entrepreneur and you're watching me, I'm sure you've made it. I think people just don't get, like, if you just work a 9 to 5, right, and that's just your world, right? I've already said this before. I'm outside of that realm. That's not the realm I operate from. Even though I'm operating within that realm for a specified period of time. It's just not who I am. So, and then my dad, like, I get it from my dad. He was an entrepreneur. He had his own business, right? When you can see, like, yo, you can make $500 in one day. You can make $1,000 in one day. Yo, money is so much money out there to be made. You understand? It can be a scary thing, though, if you're not used to it. And I said this before. It's funny, like, when you start to get money, right? You go into business for yourself. And people are giving you their money, their hard-earned money. A part of you may think that you don't deserve it. A part of you may think, like, damn, this shit got to be illegal. Right? Like, no, it's perfectly legal to make money for yourself. As long as you pay taxes, of course. But it's perfectly legal to make lots and lots of money. And it's not about, oh, you're trying to chase money and you're being materialistic and it's the root of all evil. That's a goddamn lie. Don't believe that shit, yo. We live in a society that's built on capitalism, right? Water costs money. You need water to survive, right? It goes without saying. So, yeah, part of you may feel like, no, I don't deserve it. So maybe I shouldn't charge this amount for my service. Oh, I don't feel comfortable taking it. Oh, this person, like, you create an invoice and then the invoice is fulfilled. The person pays you right away. And you're like, they just sent me $300. You just made that in a matter of minutes. From one person, right? But people think somehow you need a job to work a 9 to 5, right? Psh, over their fucking head. It reminds me, like, I do plan to relaunch the Ubawa Book Convention. Ubawa is never going anywhere. The very first Ubawa Book Convention was held in Atlanta, Georgia. It's my very first event, essentially, right? Now, I've hosted, like, parties, and of course, I had a graduation party graduating from Florida State. But it's different on a professional level when you're putting together an event, right? And you're charging people for a service, essentially, that you're delivering. And I think I had, like, was it set somewhere between like 75 and 80 vendors. People who paid me for a table for 6 hours. And I had to find a space to host this event. And when I searched and I wanted to make sure that it's a quality space, I ended up renting a space at the convention center in Atlanta, Georgia. I think it was like $4,000, $4,000 or $5,000 for 6 hours. Which is actually cheap by comparison, because the event spaces can go up to $25,000 but those are like the large scale events. And so, doing the math, for me it wasn't about profit. For me it's always been about giving back, right? But just being a person who got a brain, can easily do the math and see, like, yeah, hosting events, there's money in that. And that's, we're talking about pulling in thousands of dollars in one day, right? People don't even fucking make thousands of dollars in a paycheck sometimes, right? Or barely can make a couple $1,000s in one paycheck, and you pull that in one day. Right, so no one can tell me what I am capable of and try to treat me like I am less than, or that like I need a fucking 9-to-5 job that is paying drastically less than what I can make for myself working for my goddamn self. Especially nowadays, it's so easy to fucking make money online. It's just like it's a no-brainer at this point. So I've said enough here in this video, and I think it's clear. It goes without saying. Just know your worth. Stand on it, yo. And I don't think it's something that happens necessarily overnight, but when you get it and that switch goes off in your mind, it's a wonderful feeling. Something you can never go back to being that other person that you were, because you just like, oh, like your eyes get opened up and you're like, oh, but it is a development. Like I said, I was making hundreds of dollars a day as a teenager, like I said, just braiding hair easily, okay, a day. And so yeah, I laugh. I think it's funny sometimes. I think it's funny, the idea when people think that you don't have options, right? And they treat you as such. Not even knowing, like, I'm not even going to say no more. But I think I've said enough here in this video, and I hope you guys take away something from it. You guys get it. Like, as I speak for the black community, like, we don't have to settle for less. We choose to. You got people that like struggling, and they like working fucking 12 hours a day, fucking 16-hour shifts, overtime, just working so hard, barely being able to fucking pay the bills. That is not life. You have to, like, for me, it's just coming to a decision where you're like, nah, this ain't it, bro. This is not it. And if you gotta feel something in your spirit. A lot of people, we suppress it. That's what the issue is. Because you look at, okay, how your mom did it, how your older sister did it, how your aunt did it, how your dad did it, and you're like, all right, I guess I gotta get up and go to work. I gotta get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, go to work. I gotta do it because they did it, and it's just the way to go. Fuck that shit. Okay? Like I said, I've been hip to this shit many years ago. I felt something in my spirit go off. I'm just like, back when they talking about mop the floor. Yeah. I just had a conversation in my job, and I was telling them, that, of course, I like to go all over New York, and I was in Brooklyn yesterday. I had took off yesterday. I went to a meeting, a very interesting meeting. I'm not going to talk about that, though, because that's my personal business. But the meeting was very interesting, to say the least. Maybe I will come back and do a video on that. But after the meeting, I went to Brooklyn. Oh, that's my battery. And I was just walking around. My coworker was like, yeah, you like Brooklyn? I said, yeah, I actually want to buy a brownstone. And I've said this before, I'm going to buy a brownstone in Brooklyn. And then it was like, oh, it's very expensive. No, duh. You think I don't know what cost of real estate? But I don't, it's like my mind doesn't see it as, oh, it's expensive, right? You got people who obviously don't live in New York, and they look at New York, oh, it's so expensive. Like, why would you? But that's not how my mind works. I look at it like, listen, if I want something, it's a matter of how. It's not a matter of, oh, it's expensive. It's just a matter of how can I get it if I want it, right? And I think that approach people should take in anything in life. You know, don't look at it like, oh, it's gonna be so hard. My mind doesn't comprehend it. It doesn't compute it that way, right? It's just a matter of, do I want to do this? Do I want this? Okay, boom. How do I get it? Point blank. Period. So this person says, oh, well, yeah, it's expensive. It costs a lot of money. And I was like, yeah, I know they're like a couple $1,000,000, right? And he was like, oh, well, you can just get a fixer-upper. Like, there are townhomes you can just buy. Like, nah, I know what the fuck I want. Tell me what the fuck. But so you have people, that just goes to show you have people that they don't see that they are capable of doing something. So then they project that onto you. They project their own limitations onto you because they don't think that they're capable. And I'm going to say this, I'm about to end this video because I had to, my battery about to die. But I've said this story before where, like, when I moved back to New York in 2020, I was dating this guy. I think it was he Ghanaian? I don't know. I think it was Ghanaian, from West Africa. I had to cut his ass off, right? We're walking through Brooklyn, and of course, like, it was some really nice brownstones, and I was just like, you know, I am going to get one of these. And, like, his reaction was like smirking and, like, in disbelief, right? The way he reacted. And I was like, oh, you don't think that I'm capable of buying one of these? And I say, see, that's the problem. Like, you have a small mind. You don't think you're capable of doing that, right? So it's funny to you that I mentioned that I want to own, and I'm going to own one of these brownstones one day. But I knew he wasn't for me because he got a small mind. I can't be around people who got small minds. I'm sorry. I just can't. Like, it turns me off, especially as a man. Like, you don't deserve to be in my presence. You don't deserve, let alone fucking having sex. Like, you're a peasant to me. You don't deserve to be around me. Like, I shouldn't even be giving you my energy. Because you're not vibrating on the same frequency. And I think that's where a lot of people hold themselves back, because look who you're around. Look who you surround yourself with. You limit yourself just based on your own reflections of who you surround yourself with. That shit turns me off. He's my best friend, and we like kind of night and day. But he compliments me in a way, though. I like him. He's been my best friend for many years, since 2006. And we dated for 5 years. But yeah, it's like you gotta be careful who you share like your goals and your dreams with, or your visions with, because the vision was given to you, so you see yourself there. But other people just don't. They don't see themselves there, so you know they don't see your ass there. But some people do, though. They just don't see themselves there. Like, it's possible that a person can see your place. They can see you in a place, but they don't see themselves there. Because maybe they don't want that. You know, it's not for everybody, right? We all want different things, or aspire to have different things, or to become different things. But yeah, it does something to me when I'm communicating something to a person, especially a person that is a part of my circle, and the energy is off, yo, and they just, I'm like, I'll end the conversation, like, you know what, I'll call you back. I can't, like, I can talk to him about different things, but that's where we have to elevate, because sometimes we get stuck in certain types of interactions with people and relationships. It's just low vibrational, wondering why we can't elevate, because look who you are surrounded by. I can go on and on and on and on this shit, yo. Seriously, but I have to end this video. And I'm going to end with this. There is a meme that talks about traveling, international travel. And it's common that people have resources, right, to travel. But their friends may not. Or they're not ready to go. And the meme pretty much says, listen, if you got to go by yourself, go by yourself. waiting on these motherfuckers to raise money or to get within them the desire to go. No, leave their ass here and you go by yourself. And I think that's just how it's going to have to be for me. Because, yeah, it's like, what are we waiting for, right? We have this idea that things should be a certain way. You need this to happen for this to happen, right? Or you got to be married to do this. Or you have to have a friend to come along with you in order to do this. Like, nah, you don't need none of that. All you need is yourself and go out and live your dreams, yo. Don't put a cap on the things that you want to do in life, right? Anything you want to achieve is possible. Nothing is impossible. It's just a matter of, do you want it? Yes or no? That's it. Catch you guys later.